Okay, this is going to be a kind of a discussion of what came at the end of the Boys of Summer experience. What probably ended it was the Vietnam War. And as I talk about the Vietnam War as something other than you would listen to in a history book, or maybe see famous photographs of different things, or watch Vietnam movies or something like that, it was really different when it sort of asserted itself into your life. People don't realize now that when I was a young man, I was at UW-Madison, I thought I wanted to be a nuclear weapons policy analyst. And my grades, once we became involved in Vietnam, were a life and death matter. Because what this meant was if you got a grade point below a certain amount, then you did not get a student deferment. And if you did not get a student deferment, that meant you were 1A for draft, and you would probably be sent over into combat. I think maybe I'll take a story now, and it's very moving, and I think about it very often. One of the finest men I ever knew in my life's name was Bob Casperson. And he was killed in Vietnam in November of 1967. And I remember I was coming back from a failed job interview in Kenosha, Wisconsin, as his coffin was coming back from Vietnam. A friend of mine was in San Francisco at the time, and they led him onto the plane to see him. We all went to Bob's funeral. My friend Bob Akamatsu was there, and I'm going to be telling you more about the Akamatsu family in future tapings, but right now I want to talk a little bit more about this. One of the big things about the Vietnam era is if somebody tells you they wanted to be in the Army, they were bullshitting. Because what most people did was it was a catastrophic event, and you did anything you could to avoid it. One of my friends, he's also dead now, Bob McKernan, got a special hardship discharge because he had a young daughter, and it meant that he wouldn't have to go and be an infantry rifleman. We had another guy who was an OCS, and I had said I was 1A at the time, which meant that because of my weight, I should have been 8 feet tall to make military standard. In other words, I was overweight. But I had said, God damn it if we're going to go to another military funeral. And so we consulted this guy in such a way that he would get out of OCS and he would get another assignment, use his skills, and actually not have to face the rigors of combat. He was a very short guy, and briefly they had put him on point. That means you're the first guy in, and you're usually the guy that either steps on the claymore or gets picked off by the sniper. But he told me a story once, shortly before he died of Agent Orange toxin in 1990, called Charlie in My Starlight Scope. And Charlie was what they called the Viet Cong at that time. And he was sitting on a perimeter. They had a perimeter of 55-gallon drums of explosives that would detonate if the Viet Cong tried to infiltrate. And so there was Charlie, Viet Cong, sitting on the 55-gallon drum, smoking a joint, daring them to detonate, because then the rest of them would come through. They sat like that all night, and this is a good war story because nobody got killed that night. Everybody got through, and I got to tell the story. So what you have to understand is you could be against the war, but not against not the people who fought it. You know, you could say, well, this is a tragic thing. Young men and some women, actually there are women in the Vietnam Memorial now, and there probably should be a lot more, but mostly what happened is they were trapped doing what soldiers always do, which is trying to keep themselves and their buddies alive. I remember another situation. I hung around with theoretical mathematicians. I'm pretty annoyingly smart and love to do that, and a very good chess player. But my friend Rich Jensen, another very fine guy, was in a situation where he was grading papers at Lorenzo's Bar and Grill as we were playing chess and getting drunk. And he looked at the guy's paper, and it had a skull and crossbones on the inside of the cover. And the note said, you know, if I don't get a D- on this exam, I'm going to levy for Vietnam and I'm probably going to get killed. And Richard and I looked at each other and I said, well, Rich, how about this? Why don't I buy another picture and you take a look at that paper and see if you can get that guy a few more points. You got a D-. There was another time where I kind of went from thinking I would be a kind of a policy wonk, you know, smart guy sort of a thing. But we were at that time doing analysis where we were looking at nuclear war and saying, well, if a nuclear war happens, reading people like Herman Kahn and thinking the unthinkable, and the Soviets lose 100 million killed, and we lose 70, then we've won. That's fucking crazy. I mean, you can leave that on the tape. I lived through the Cuban Missile Crisis. There were times we had enough nuclear potential almost 60 years ago to turn the world into a firestorm. I know this because I played chess with high energy physics. And somehow, through some grace, I'm here to tell this story to you and say you really got to be careful of the politicians who you give the football to. You really do not want a crazy man or other getting involved in a pissing contest with some foreign leader, totally misunderstanding the implications of what they're talking about. And I guess that's as strong as I get for anti-war, and I guess that's probably about what I'll say about history. And if I had a course, I'd be honored. Maybe I will have a course. Maybe some of you will sign up for it. Hi, this is Phil Kaveny from Phil Kaveny Production, wearing my producer's hat. And I want you to keep in contact with us through your likes on Facebook, through your support on YouTube, or by email contacting me at cleofa1885@gmail.com or 715-497-6369.